Section 20 of The Aftermath of Slavery by William Sinclair. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Public Opinion, Omnipotent, Part 2. The advent into public life of men of their mental caliber, political honesty, and moral courage, men broad in statesmanship, liberal-minded, invincible to passion and prejudice, devoted to free institutions, will be the harbinger of better days for both the white and colored people of the sunny South, as it will also mean the overturn and banishment into political oblivion of the reactionists, the Negrophobists, the Jim Crowites, and the whole brood of those who fatten on public office or public patronage by preaching hatred and strife between the races, and who are the worst enemies the Southern people have to fear. The nation longs for peace which is purchased at the sacrifice of the dictates of justice and humanity and the vital principles of Christianity, is not only too costly in price, but it is a worthless peace. It is worthless because the conscience of the American people will not accept it. It would not even bridge over matters. The mere announcement of peace, purchased at such a price, would open wide the floodgates of agitation and strife. The dominant leadership of the South is endeavoring to turn back the hands of the dial of time and engraft on the Republic the leading principles of the Southern Confederacy. Thus they would achieve by indirect action what failed of accomplishment by open rebellion, the perpetual subjugation and servitude of a people. The Honorable Alexander H. Stephens, Vice President of the Confederacy, made this historical declaration in a speech delivered at Savannah, Georgia, on the 21st of March, 1861, less than a month before Old Glory was fired on at Fort Sumter. The new Constitution has put at rest forever all the agitating questions relating to our peculiar institution, African slavery, as it exists among us, the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization. This was the immediate cause of the rupture and present revolution. Jefferson, in his forecast, had anticipated this as the rock upon which the old Union would split. He was right. What was conjecture with him is now a realized fact. But whether he fully comprehended the great truth upon which that great rock stood and stands may be doubted. The prevailing ideas entertained by him and most of the leading statesmen at the time of the formation of the old Constitution were that the enslavement of the African was in violation of the laws of nature, that it was wrong in principle, socially, morally, and politically. It was an evil they knew not well how to deal with. But the general opinion of the men of the day was that, somehow or other, in the order of Providence, the institution would be evanescent and pass away. This idea, though not incorporated in the Constitution, was the prevailing idea at the time. The Constitution, it is true, secured every essential guarantee to the institution while it should last, and hence no argument can be justly used against the constitutional guarantees thus secured because of the common sentiment of the day. These ideas, however, were fundamentally wrong. They rested upon the assumption of the equality of races. This was an error. It was a sandy foundation, and the idea of a government built upon it. When the storm came and the wind blew, it fell. Our new government is founded upon exactly the opposite ideas. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. This truth has been slow in the process of its development, like all other truths in the various departments of science. It has been so even among us. Many who hear me, perhaps, can recollect well that this truth was not generally admitted even in this day. Mr. Stevens emphasizes the statement that the Confederate government was the first in the history of the world to make human slavery its foundation stone. It will probably be the last. He lived to learn, however, that no government in the history of the world ever had such a fitful, transient, and malodorous existence. It died a-borning, in the very throes and agonies of its own travail, and without the pity of a single civilized nation. The Almighty did not permit it to darken the earth or curse humanity with its presence, save as a scourge and punishment to the nation, and to cleanse and purge it of the sin and crime of slavery. When the storm came and the wind blew, it fell, but the government based on the immortal and divine principles of justice and equality for all stood the severest tests and shocks of the greatest war of these ages, and vindicated the principles held by Jefferson and most of the leading statesmen of his time, that the enslavement of the African was in violation of the laws of nature, that it was wrong in principle, socially, morally, and politically. It may also be noted that Mr. Stevens further said of the Southern Confederacy that its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. The principles enunciated by Mr. Stevens are monstrously inhuman. The people of the United States are superior in many things to the people of the Latin republics of South America, but does that give the right to North America to conquer or deport the inhabitants of South America and hold them in slavery, subordination to the superior race, as their natural and normal condition? Some nations in Europe are distinctly superior to other nations, but what nation, arrogating its superiority, would dare to make the attempt to conquer or deport the inhabitants of a weaker country and make slaves of them? Mr. Stevens, however, speaking in 1861, was uttering the exact thoughts and even words that are proclaimed by Southern leaders today on the floors of the Congress, in the halls of legislation, on the lecture platform, sometimes in the pulpit, and frequently in the public press. Truly, some neither learn nor forget. Mr. Lincoln was far wiser than Mr. Stevens. He said, if slavery is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. And it would seem to follow that if outraging and oppressing a man on the ground of color is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. The truth of God, the sentiment of civilization, and the public opinion of the country were with Mr. Lincoln, and because of this, in the Constitution of the United States, it is written, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The right of the citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. There are also guarantees for the right to the writ of habeas corpus, for freedom of speech, for a free press, to keep and bear arms, for a public and speedy trial, to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses, to compulsory process for the attendance of one's own witnesses, to have counsel, to trial by jury, immunity from bill of attainder, from ex post facto laws, from unreasonable searches and seizures, from trial for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on presentment or indictment of a grand jury, from being compelled to testify against oneself, from excessive bail, from excessive fines, from cruel or unusual punishment. Not one of these righteous, humane laws is honestly observed in the South with regard to the colored man. There is, on the contrary, a general repudiation of them, and in many essential respects the South is governed by the galvanized corpse of the Southern Confederacy rather than by the Constitution of the United States. It has often been demonstrated that the life of a colored man is not held as sacred in the South as the life of a robin on the Boston Common or a swan on the lakes of Lincoln Park in Chicago. But two vital considerations may apply here, one divine, one human. First, the thunderbolts of God are still hot, and righteousness and judgment are the habitation of his throne. Second, the American people have shown in their history that when they make up their minds to do a thing, they do it. When they determine to accomplish a result, they will find a way or make it. The particular manner of the cooperation between the divine and the human powers may not be thoroughly understood. The fact of the cooperation, however, human history abundantly illustrates. God's hand can be plainly seen in the history of this republic. There is more than euphony in these words of Holy Writ. Righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Sin is not without its wages. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever." The hour came, God's justice did awaken. The country was convulsed and shocked from center to circumference, and the best blood of the nation paid the atonement. The lesson should not be forgotten. The humiliations, outrages, and inhumanities now forced on the colored man, contrary to law, human and divine, are a sin and a reproach to the nation. Public opinion is the remedial agent. It is all potent because the truth and God are behind it. A cloud of witnesses speak from the skies. Some of these were workmen who laid the keel and were on the deck at the launching of the ship of state. Others were at quarters on guard and at the wheel through all the trying ordeals and the perilous voyages of a century and a quarter. The voices of the most eminent men and women now living are also heard with no uncertain sound. They plead for righteousness, for justice, for humanity, and in the name of God. Fundamentally, a nation is wise in so far as it is righteous. It is strong and powerful in so far as it is just. It is safe and invincible in so far as it has the favor of the God of battles. From the depth of hearts, warmed with the fire of liberty and with love for their country, faith in humanity, and abiding confidence in the almighty and righteous ruler of the universe, the illustrious fathers and the glorious sons of the Republic speak out. Will the South give ear? Will the nation take heed? Hear them. Thomas Jefferson says, and with what execration should the statesman be loaded, who, permitting one half the citizens thus to trample on the rights of the other, transforms those into despots and these into enemies, destroys the morale of the one part and the amor patriae of the other? And can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God, that they are not to be violated but with his wrath? Mr. Bancroft, writing of Mr. Jefferson, says the heart of Jefferson in writing the Declaration and of Congress in adopting it beat for all humanity. The assertion of right was made for all mankind and all coming generations without any exception whatever, for the proposition which admits of exceptions can never be self-evident. The last public act of Benjamin Franklin was the signing and presentation of a memorial to Congress as president of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society, in which these words occur, that mankind are all formed by the same almighty being, alike objects of his care, and equally designed for the enjoyment of happiness. The Christian religion teaches us to believe, and the political creed of Americans fully coincides with the position. They have observed with real satisfaction that many important and salutary powers are vested in you for promoting the welfare and securing the blessings of liberty to the people of the United States. And as they conceive that these blessings ought rightfully to be administered without distinction as to color to all descriptions of people, so they indulge themselves in the pleasing expectations that nothing which can be done for the relief of the unhappy objects of their care will be omitted or delayed. From the persuasion that equal liberty was originally the position and is still the birthright of all men, and influenced by the strong ties of humanity and the principles of their institutions, your memorialists conceive themselves bound to promote a general enjoyment of the blessings of freedom. To General Lafayette, who denounced slavery as a crime blacker than any African's face and labored for its abolition, George Washington wrote, "Would to God a like spirit might diffuse itself generally into the minds of the people of this country." Washington also declared that the propitious smiles of heaven could never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right. The Honorable Henry Laurens of South Carolina, President of the Continental Congress, Minister to Holland, and Commissioner with Franklin and Jay to negotiate peace with Great Britain, left on record these emphatic words: "I'm not one of those who arrogate the peculiar care of Providence in each fortunate event, nor one of those who dare trust in Providence for defense and security of their own liberty, while they enslave and wish to continue in slavery thousands who are as well entitled to freedom as themselves." The Reverend Isaac Backus of Massachusetts says, "The American Revolution was built upon the principle that all men are born with an equal right to liberty and property." The voices of George Mason of Virginia and Livingston of New York, Gadsden of South Carolina, and the Adamses of Massachusetts, Alexander Hamilton of New York, and John Tyler of Virginia, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, and Luther Martin of Maryland, Joshua Atherton of New Hampshire, and George Tucker of Virginia, Rufus King of Massachusetts, and Edmund Randolph of Virginia, and a host of others, these all express the sentiment of liberty and humanity. Of special significance are the declarations of the Honorable John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, and thus the first final authority in interpreting the Constitution and laws under it. He says, "I believe that God governs the world, and I believe it to be a maxim in his as in our court that those who ask for equity ought to do it." And again, "Till America comes into this measure, her prayers to heaven for liberty will be impious, and further to contend for our own liberty and to deny that blessing to others involves an inconsistency not to be excused." What act of public or private justice and philanthropy can occasion more pleasing emotions in the breast of Christians, or be more agreeable to him who shed his blood for the redemption of men, than such as tend to restore the oppressed to their natural rights, and to raise unfortunate members of the same great family with ourselves from the abject situation of beasts of burden, bought and sold and worked for the benefit and at the pleasure of persons who were not created more free, more rational, more immortal, nor with more extensive rights and privileges than they were. Concerning the discordant note of Chief Justice Taney, which was the embodiment of the slaveholder's idea that the Negro had no rights, which the white man was bound to respect, Mr. George Livermore, in his historical research, says, "It shocked the moral sentiment of our own community and excited the indignant rebuke of some of the most eminent jurists and statesmen of Europe, who declared the sentiments to be so execrable as to be almost incredible." The Honorable George Bancroft says he has not only denied the rights of manhood, the liberties of mankind, but has not left a foothold for the liberty of the white man to rest upon. No nation can adopt that judgment as its rule and live. The judgment has in it no element of political vitality. If black men can be put into practical slavery or be oppressed, the same kind of power can force white men into practical slavery or under the rod of oppression. Fleecy locks and dark complexions do not alter nature's claim. Skins may differ, but affections dwell in black and white the same. This idea of Justice Taney, however, is the central idea in the plan of campaign of Southern leaders, and this accounts for the Jim Crow laws and the Jim Crowism which disgraces the South and is the shame of the nation. A press dispatch recently reports Thomas Grades, a well-dressed Negro, is more familiar today with the Jim Crow laws of Virginia than he was when he left New York. He was dragged from a train at Alexandria and taken to the station house, where he said he was unfamiliar with the law, and on payment of $10 collateral for his appearance was released. Grades had traveled from New York in comfortable fashion, but at the Virginia end of the Long Bridge, the conductor requested him to go forward to the little pen set aside for Negroes. He refused, and at Alexandria the entire force was employed to drag him from the car. After depositing the $10, he proceeded on his journey in the Jim Crow pen. Is this civilization? Is it Christianity? Is it not barbarous? Yet every colored person, regardless of the excellence of his inner life or outward behavior, whatever his talents, possessions, or high standing in the Republic, is subject to these barbarous laws of the South. A colored woman or a schoolgirl is treated the same way. In every case, first-class fare is demanded and paid, and Jim Crow accommodations are forced on them. Sad indeed that the ineffable meanness of it does not appeal to the higher sense of justice, the spirit of humanity, or the Christian ethics of the white people of the South. A colored man travels from the city of Washington, the nation's capital, to the Pacific coast. The time required is about 5 days, and the distance is over 3,000 miles. He may be a high official of the government, dispatched on public business. The train stops at various places for breakfast, for dinner, for lunch, and for supper. Every person on board of the train, except a colored person, can freely buy refreshments or meals. But no colored person, not even the Register of the Treasury of the United States, who is a colored man, can cross the threshold of a single dining room, or even slake his thirst with a cup of coffee, or munch a sandwich at a lunch counter. And yet it is written in the Holy Scriptures, and whosoever shall give to drink unto one of these little ones a cup of cold water only in the name of a disciple, verily I say unto you, he shall not lose his reward. Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. The colored man, government official, minister, or bishop of a Greek denomination, with money in his pockets, cannot buy food and drink to refresh his body. Not in all civilization outside the boundary of the South is such a condition possible, nor even among semi-civilized people, and hardly among the savages. The Negro has no right which the white man, that is, the Southern white man, is bound to respect. The harsh and discordant words of Chief Justice Taney may, however, serve to emphasize the strength of the spirit of liberty in the American heart. That spirit has survived every assault and is the abiding heritage of the American people. But the sons of the Republic, like the fathers, also speak for liberty and humanity. President Garfield said, and this thing we will remember. We will remember our allies who fought with us. Soon after the struggle began, we looked behind the army of white rebels and saw 4 millions of black people condemned to toil as slaves for our enemies. And we found that the hearts of these 4 millions were God-inspired with the spirit of liberty, and that they were our friends. We have seen white men betray the flag, but in all that long, dreary war, we never saw a traitor in a black skin. Our prisoners escaping from the starvation of prisons, fleeing to our lines by the light of the North Star, never feared to enter the black man's cabin and ask for bread. In all that period of suffering and danger, no Union soldier was ever betrayed by a black man or woman. And now that we have made them free, so long as we live, we will stand by these black allies. We will stand by them until the sun of liberty, fixed in the firmament of our Constitution, shall shine with equal ray upon every man, black or white, throughout the Union. General Sherman said the South went out of the Union. It came back with 5/5 voting power based on the Negro population, and it is not fair, it is not just, it is not honorable for the South to suppress the Negro vote. Mr. Blaine said no human right on this continent is more completely guaranteed than the right against disfranchisement on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude as embodied in the 15th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. And he further says without the right of citizenship, the Negro's freedom could be maintained only in name. and without the elective franchise his citizenship would have no legitimate and no authoritative protection. General Grant in his memoirs said 4 millions of human beings held as chattels have been liberated. The ballot has been given to them. The free schools of the country have been opened to their children. The nation still lives, and the people are just as free to avoid social intimacy with the blacks as ever they were, or as they are with white people. President Benjamin Harrison said, as long as free suffrage shall be held by our people to be a jewel above price, as long as each for himself shall claim its free exercise, and shall generously and manfully insist upon an equally free exercise of it by every other man, our government will be preserved and our development will not find its climax until the purpose of God in establishing this government shall have spread throughout the world, government of the people, for the people, and by the people. And with the voices of these sons of the Republic are heard the voices of Logan, John Sherman, Stanton, Chase, Sheridan, Longfellow, Whittier, Joshua R. Giddings, McKinley, and a mighty host of others, a glorious company speaking as it were from the skies to the American people. The vast body of the American people today think the same thoughts and would say the same words, and their voice is the voice of God speaking through the human heart. Public opinion is omnipotent. Let it speak in thunder tones. Its commanding voice will be heard, respected, and obeyed. It will prevail because it carries with it the grandeur of noble conviction, the majesty of the truth, the sovereignty of the right, and the power and determination of execution. Kipling's recessional, penned in the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the reign of Victoria, the most gracious queen and sovereign of our world empire, in essentials perhaps the most illustrious ruler the world has ever seen, embodies at once the hopes, doubts, vanities, and fears, the struggles, triumphs, and prayers of a people. It points the way to greatness and glory because it points the way to the mind of God. Its lesson cannot fail to impress the American heart. God of our fathers, known of old, Lord of our far-flung battle line, beneath whose awful hand we hold dominion over palm and pine, Lord God of hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. The tumult and the shouting dies, the captains and the kings depart, still stands thine ancient sacrifice, and humble and a contrite heart. Lord God of hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. Far called, our navies melt away, on dune and headland sinks the fire. Lo, all our pomp of yesterday is one with Nineveh and Tyre. Judge of the nations, spare us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. If drunk with sight of power, we loose wild tongues that have not thee in awe, such boasting as the Gentiles use, or lesser breeds without the law. Lord God of hosts, be with us yet, lest we forget, lest we forget. For heathen heart that puts her trust in reeking tube and iron shard, all valiant dust that builds on dust, and guarding calls not thee to guard. For frantic boast and foolish word, thy mercy on thy people, Lord. Amen. End of section 20. End of Aftermath of Slavery by William Sinclair.